What if Rimuru's Omni-Versal Journey? By J.M. 1001. What if the supreme deity Rimuru visited different universes? Rimuru has become Veldanava's successor, but unlike Veldanava and Rimuru being bored decides to go on an adventure and interact with other universes, becoming more powerful and having fun as he does so. Chapter 4. Hippolyta, who? The following morning, Rimuru awoke in bed, his beautiful queen seal still asleep soundly while hugging his chest. Seeing this, Rimuru couldn't help but smile as he gave Seal a kiss on the forehead before gently moving her over so he could slowly sit up. Upon feeling her lover's movement, Seal too slowly started to wake up. She turned to see Rimuru already awake, so she sat up as well and delivered a good morning kiss. Now that the pair were both awake, Rimuru asked Seal, "Morning, Seal, wanna see what the food's like here and get some breakfast?" Seal replied, full of affection, "I would love to." Rimuru said, "All right, let's get dressed then." With a flick of their fingers, the pair both got dressed in an instant, using magic to materialize their clothes. The pair then both exited the room, making their way to the food hall. Along the way, they got their fair share of inquisitive and envious stares. When the two had finally made it to the food hall, the place fell completely quiet as everyone observed the newcomers. The two didn't pay much attention to everyone's stares as they walked to get some food. On the contrary, the pair actually found everyone's glances a little bit amusing, even more so when they spotted some of the girls who were listening in on them last night. Whenever the couple's eyes made contact with the girls, their faces turned as red as wine. This made both Rimuru and Seal giggle, trying their best not to let out full-blown laughs in the process. The two then plated themselves some food and found a place to sit. Their breakfast wasn't anything special, but it was good. The food was mainly what would be considered an English breakfast. While enjoying their food, the couple were joined by Superman and Wonder Woman. Both Superman and Diana were courteous in saying good morning to Rimuru. However, the pair were curious about the sudden appearance of the newcomer. Superman turned to Seal and asked, "I don't believe we've met. Who may you be?" Rimuru returned the greeting after introducing his partner. "Good morning, Superman, Wonder Woman. Let me introduce you. This here is my soul partner and beautiful wife, Seal Tempest." The food hall fell dead silent as everyone heard the sudden revelation that Rimuru and Seal were married. Most of the women and even some men felt disheartened by the sudden information. However, breaking the awkward silence, Wonder Woman was the first to ask, "Wait, your wife? Does that mean she's?" Rimuru replied, "Yes, that's right. Seal too is a god or goddess to be more accurate." The sudden revelation that another god was residing in the Justice League HQ was shocking news indeed. However, after yesterday's meeting, Diana was now more curious to learn about the gods and what truly makes someone a god. Diana intriguingly asked Seal, Lady Seal, may I ask what you are the goddess of? We know about Rimuru being the successor to the creator, but I'm quite interested to know about yourself." Both Rimuru and Seal were quite surprised by Diana's sudden change in mood from yesterday. To go from outright dismissal to now holding a genuine curiosity. Well, let's just say the pair saw Diana in a new light. Seal answered, "I don't mind at all. I am the goddess of all knowledge and wisdom." Superman and Wonder Woman were completely flabbergasted to find out about Seal's true identity, and it showed on their faces. However, their astonishment was quickly replaced by confusion when both Rimuru and Seal started laughing at them. Rimuru said, "Ahaha, you should see your faces. Ahaha. But yeah, putting jokes aside for the moment, the truth is Seal here is definitely the smartest being in existence." Taking this chance, Superman asked the one question everyone had had on their mind since first seeing Seal. Rimuru, sir, if you don't mind me asking, how did Seal get here? She wasn't with you yesterday." Wonder Woman nodded, agreeing with Superman, and both eagerly awaited the answer. To the pair's surprise, Rimuru began to light-heartedly laugh before answering. "Aha, She was with me the entire time. She just didn't make her presence known to you, that's all. Obviously, this wasn't the entire truth. Rimuru just couldn't be bothered to explain it in full detail first thing in the morning. So after a little bit of chatting, Rimuru and Seal finished up their meals, cleaned up after themselves, and made their way to the main control room. Upon arriving, they were met with the sight of Batman and Martian Manhunter doing their regular duties. At first, Batman and the Martian were surprised to see Seal, but after Rimuru explained to them who she was, they immediately backed down. Rimuru then informed the two Justice Leaguers that they would be visiting Earth, which certainly piqued their interest, especially Batman, who subtly probed as to where they were going and why. Rimuru went on to explain that he and Seal were heading to an island located near Diana's homeland to meditate. It was then that Superman and Wonder Woman entered the room and overheard Rimuru's last statement, which certainly piqued Wonder Woman's interest. She offered to give them a lift in her jet, to which Rimuru agreed, thinking it would be interesting to bring her along. The group then boarded Wonder Woman's invisible jet. The group strapped themselves in as Diana asked, "So where is this island you're interested in?" Seal was the one to answer the specifics. "About 100 miles southeast of your homeland." Wonder Woman, knowing the island Seal spoke of, asked curiously, "I know that island. There's nothing there, though. It's just an isolated, uninhabited island." Rimuru couldn't hide his smirk as he aloofly stated, "Well, maybe you all just didn't look hard enough." Wonder Woman had no reply, and Rimuru's statement only fueled her curiosity even more. Wasting no time, Diana flew the group there as quickly as possible. It didn't take them very long to reach the island. After all, Diana's jet was alien technology. The island itself could only be described as a pretty large skerry with grass. However, it was just the place they were looking for. Rimuru then instructed Diana to land on the outskirts of the island on a flat bit of dirt he pointed out. Diana followed Rimuru's advice and landed where he said to. When the group stepped out of the jet, Seal ominously asked Rimuru, "Do you feel that?" Rimuru, without uttering a sound, bent down and grabbed a handful of soil before stating back, "I do. It's definitely here." Diana didn't say anything, just observing the pair with curiosity as they began making their way closer to the center of the island. Eventually, Rimuru came to a stop while looking down at the ground, like he could see something others could not. A moment later, Rimuru turned to look at Seal and gave her a nod, to which Seal nodded back and seemingly disappeared from Diana's sight in the next instant. Diana was shocked and confused by Seal's sudden disappearance, but decided to bite her tongue and simply watch. With Seal now back with Rimuru, he sat down, crossing his legs in a meditative position, and closed his eyes to begin to meditate. Diana just stood waiting in anticipation for something to happen, but for a few minutes, nothing seemed to happen, and for a moment, Diana was beginning to think that maybe Rimuru had actually just come here to meditate. However, thinking too soon, slowly but suddenly, the ground began to vibrate. The vibrations eventually became so great that the grass on the island tore away and the surface of the ground began to splinter. Diana was struggling greatly just to even keep her footing and eventually was forced to take flight and hover just above the island. However, what happened next would shock her to her very core. Suddenly, as the ground splintered apart, what was revealed beneath was a lava-like energy that began to force its way to the surface. From Diana's point of view, what was revealed to her was this lava-like energy coming together to form the emblem that Darkseid had encrusted on his chest plate. Diana watched on in horror as this lava-like energy arose from the ground like snakes raising their heads and began to flow into Rimuru's body from all directions, as if it were merging with his very being. Diana knew all too well what this lava-like energy was, as she muttered under her breath, "Anti-life," as if even mentioning the phrase was forbidden. However, as Diana watched on with bated breath, the anti-life equation began merging into Rimuru's body. Surprisingly, Rimuru's body began to hover just slightly above the ground, eventually lifting higher and higher as he took in more and more of the anti-life. As unsure as Diana was, all appeared to be going well so far. However, again, this was premature thinking. All of a sudden, as Rimuru was continuing to take in copious amounts of anti-life, a dark, ominous black energy began swirling in the sky, like a raging tornado about to bear down on Rimuru. Meanwhile, as this was all going on, Rimuru and Seal were chatting away like all was normal. Rimuru, so how's it looking, Seal? Seal, good, Master. I can confirm that this energy source is indeed what that Darkseid fellow was looking for. Records show that this energy source is referred to as the anti-life equation in this multiverse. After further analysis, it appears this energy source holds the power to strip all living organisms of their free will. But I believe that this new energy currently gathering above Master's head would combine perfectly with the anti-life equation to create something new and more optimal for Master. Rimuru, I see. It certainly is a nasty power on its own, that's for sure, and I probably wouldn't use it, but your plan sounds intriguing. All right, I give my permission to implement this plan of yours, Seal. Seal was excited, getting permission to partake in her favorite hobby, answering Rimuru with a gleeful voice. Understood. Beginning implementation. As Seal began implementing her plan, back in the outside world it was utter pandemonium. The Justice League had urgently got into contact with Diana to find out what exactly was going on. They explained to her that from the watchtower in space, it looked like the darkness of space itself was alive and converging in on their location. Diana was even more astonished to learn that this gigantic black tornado that had formed above them was, in fact, the darkness of space itself. However, as awestruck as Diana was, she didn't hesitate to issue an order to evacuate and keep away any and all living beings in the vicinity. No one was to get close out of fear for the unknown. The Justice League wasted no time and sprung into action, with nearly all their members being sent down to set up a 50-mile perimeter around the island. Surprisingly, though, amidst the chaos, Diana's mother, Queen Hippolyta of Themyscira, appeared along with some of her most trusted warriors, clearly dressed ready for battle. Seeing her mother and aides here dressed as they were, Diana couldn't help but ask with concern, "Mother, what are you doing here?" Hippolyta answered, equally concerned. "I could say the same thing, Diana. What is going on here?" Diana's gaze fell back on Rimuru as she stated, "To be honest, I'm not entirely sure what's happening right now." Following Diana's line of sight, Hippolyta, as well as her aides, turned to see Rimuru meditating at the center of all this madness. The sight of Rimuru meditating completely unaffected, while this evil lava-like energy surged into his body, sent a spine-tingling shiver down Queen Hippolyta's back. The first words to leave the queen's mouth upon witnessing such an act were quite simple. "We must stop that disgusting thing at all costs." Hearing her mother's sudden proclamation, Diana immediately tried to intervene. "Mother, you mustn't do that." Hippolyta was shocked hearing her daughter try and protect this evil creature, but her view was unwavering. "What are you thinking, Diana? That creature is evil, and if we let it have its way, it'll be the death of us all." Diana tried her best to stop them, frantically shouting, "No, you mustn't, you don't understand." However, Queen Hippolyta was having none of it as she completely ignored her daughter's advice and issued her commands. "Follow me, my sisters. Together we will purge this evil creature in the name of the gods, for Themyscira." With Queen Hippolyta leading the charge herself, the Themysciran warriors under her command followed her as they descended upon Rimuru like valkyries. With their weapons drawn and ready, the women's ferocity was on full display as each and every one of them lined themselves up for a perfect kill shot. Just as the ladies were about to enter striking distance, bam! Like getting hit by a truck, a sudden golden energy came out of nowhere and pushed all the warriors away, sending them crashing into the ground. The Themyscians had no idea what just hit them and were sluggish in getting back onto their feet. To their surprise, what stood before them was a golden-armored man, clearly positioning himself to protect this evil creature. Queen Hippolyta was furious at being stopped by a man in such a manner, and was about to voice her outrage when suddenly Diana showed up to save her mother from her mistake. Diana bowed respectfully as she pleaded to the golden man, "Please forgive my mother's impudence, Fate. She didn't know what she was doing." Fate stared furiously at Hippolyta, his gaze giving even the queen goosebumps. This was followed by an intimidating statement. "Impudence is putting it mildly. Do you truly understand the damage that could have been done if she had actually interrupted the Supreme One?" Diana, still bowing respectfully, answered as courteously as possible, "I do, but my mother does not. Please look over this transgression just this once, and I swear on my name that this will not happen again." Fate continued to furiously stare down the lady before him until finally answering, "Very well, Diana of Themyscira. But mark my words, should they try anything as foolish as this again, I will personally eradicate Themyscira for the betterment of the universe." Upon hearing Fate's threats, the Themyscians all readied their weapons for a fight, thinking that Fate was just some upstart cocky sorcerer. However, Diana again stayed respectful, even when her homeland was threatened, as she replied, "I understand." Hippolyta, as well as the other Themyscians, all looked at Diana with disdain, thinking that she had been completely corrupted by living in the world of men for too long. Before leaving, Fate gave one last warning to Diana. "I will leave this to you, but know that I will be watching." Diana nodded in understanding before Fate left to resume his duties. With Fate's departure, the Themysciran women all looked to Diana like a traitor. Hippolyta was especially mad as she grabbed hold of Diana's arm, demanding answers. "What's the meaning of this, Diana? You dare side with an outsider over us?" However, surprising everyone present, Diana turned and slapped her own mother in the face. The sudden slap shocked everyone, none more so than Hippolyta herself. While this might have seemed overhanded, Diana felt she needed to showcase the severity of the situation in the quickest way possible. So after the shocking slap, Diana went on to angrily state, "You should have listened to me, mother. Because of you jumping to conclusions and ignoring me, you have now not only put Themyscira at great risk but the entire universe." Upon hearing Diana's statement, Hippolyta looked at Diana with a calm rage as she asked, "You better have a good excuse for this, Diana. If not, you will be charged with striking the queen." Diana's determined gaze was unfazed even in the face of death as she went on to explain the situation. Diana then explained that the man known as Fate was, in fact, the servant of the gods of Fate and is able to communicate with the gods directly at all times, while being able to borrow the power of the gods at the same time. The more the Themyscians learned, the more they wished they had listened to her previous warning. However, the true icing on the cake was when they learned who it was they had just tried to attack. Diana explained to everyone that Rimuru was the successor of the god that had created all of existence. The sudden revelation felt like the world had just caved in on them. The realization that they had just tried to strike a god that could end existence for fun had just sunk in. Hippolyta, in particular, feared what the ramifications of her actions could mean, not just for herself but for her people too. However, swooping in like a guardian angel, Diana firmly spoke, "Fortunately, nothing's happened, and I don't think Rimuru's one to hold a grudge over such a reason, so I believe we are safe." Hearing Diana's words filled the women with a small sense of hope, but only time would tell. As Diana waited for Rimuru to awaken, the Themyscians prayed for mercy. Suddenly, breaking everyone's train of thought, the swirling dark mass of energy that had been accumulating over their heads this entire time finally reached its threshold and began barreling down on top of Rimuru. However, not expecting what came next, Diana could only later describe the sight as if witnessing a devastating raging tornado being overpowered and sucked up into a vacuum cleaner. The destructive swirling black mass appeared as if it were being absorbed through Rimuru's head, while the anti-life continued being absorbed through his lower half. It truly was a divine sight. However, back in Rimuru's imaginary space, it was business as usual. Rimuru, what's this other energy? It feels familiar but at the same time different. Seal, Master is right. Analysis has shown that this other energy source is identified as dark matter. I believe it is the reason why this universe has so many superpowered individuals. Further analysis has shown it's a degraded version of Master's turn null, but is comparable with Stardust energy with slightly more magical properties. Seal's analysis had certainly raised Rimuru's curiosity. He asked, interesting. And how long do you think you'll need until you're finished implementing your plan? Seal, roughly 24 hours. Rimuru, excellent. Anything I can help with? Seal, if Master would finish the absorption of the anti-life quicker, then the combination process can be accomplished much faster. Rimuru agreed with Seal and turned the majority of his attention into fully absorbing all the anti-life out of the planet. Taking only a couple of hours, Rimuru had completely drained the anti-life equation out of the planet. However, obviously, he was far from finished. For the next 18 hours, he continued to meditate, constantly absorbing dark matter the entire time. Using thought acceleration at x1000, Seal was intricately weaving the dark matter and anti-life equation together, taking great care in forming something completely new. Rimuru watched the process unfold with keen interest, occasionally asking if Seal needed any help. This continued until finally Seal spoke the magic words, "The process is complete, Master." Rimuru's cheerful voice echoed out, "Nicely done, Seal. Can you continue to analyze this new energy and give me a report later? I think it's about time we stopped freaking out the outside world." Seal understood, Master. It was then that the dark matter Rimuru had continuously been absorbing for the last 18 hours suddenly vanished without a trace. Diana and the Themyscians all looked to the sky in amazement, seeing the beautiful blue sky back to its original form. However, Diana quickly realized that this sign could only mean one thing. She quickly turned her attention back to where Rimuru should have been sitting, only to see nothing there. Diana looked around frantically trying to spot Rimuru, only to suddenly hear Rimuru's voice from over her shoulder. "Thanks for waiting. Shall we get going?" Rimuru's sudden appearance caught Diana and the Themyscians off guard, causing the ladies to accidentally let out a scream. Rimuru, of course, had been aiming for this reaction and couldn't help but laugh at everyone's frightened faces. Diana was embarrassed, to say the least. However, she was too tired right now to even argue. And seeing that Rimuru was finally awake put her at ease. "Diana, well, if you don't have anywhere else you would like to explore, shall we head back to the watchtower?" Rimuru answered with a thumbs up and a smile, to which Diana smiled back while internally celebrating. To everyone present, it appeared that Rimuru was none the wiser about what had transpired in the outside world. However, this couldn't be further from the truth. He knew exactly what Diana had done for him over the last 20 or so hours. He thought to himself that he should reward Diana for her efforts. While Rimuru and Diana's exchange was taking place, Queen Hippolyta and the Themyscians all held their breath, begging in their minds for mercy. Then, the moment they had all been dreading finally came. Rimuru looked in their direction with his golden, piercing eyes. Imminent fear filled their bodies as they began to shiver. However, looking at the group of women before him with an uninterested expression, Rimuru turned to Diana, nonchalantly asking, playing dumb, "Are they part of your superhero gang?" Diana tried to retort, stating, "We're not a gang," with Rimuru just sarcastically laughing at her. After a quick introduction, that was the extent of Rimuru's interaction with the Themyscians. He already knew exactly what had happened and felt Diana had already handled the matter. Besides, even if Rimuru had gotten involved before, he hadn't intended to do anything drastic anyway. So with the 20-hour-long dilemma finally coming to a close, Hippolyta apologized to her daughter before departing with her warriors back to Themyscira. The Justice League, too, were given the okay to return to the watchtower, with Rimuru and Diana following closely behind in her jet.